The glass door shattered into 1,000 pieces, and Marcus felt his back press against the cold metal shelf behind the counter. 3 men moved closer, their shadows stretching across the floor like dark fingers reaching for him. His phone was somewhere on the ground, the emergency operator's voice tiny and distant. Time seemed to freeze as the tallest one reached into his jacket, and Marcus thought about his daughter's birthday tomorrow. The cake he'd ordered sitting in the employee fridge. Then the bell above the door chimed and everything changed. Before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to Soul Light Stories if you haven't already. We share powerful real stories about kindness and human connection that remind us of the good in this world. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments what moments of unexpected kindness have touched your life. Now, let me tell you what happened that night at Miller's Corner Store. Marcus Williams had worked the night shift at Miller's Corner Store for 3 years. It wasn't glamorous work, standing behind a scratched plexiglass counter from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, selling cigarettes and lottery, tickets to insomniacs and truck drivers, passing through their small Indiana town. But it paid the bills, and more importantly, it let him be home during the day with his 8-year-old daughter Emma while his wife Sarah worked her nursing shift at County General. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and Marcus had learned to find meaning in the small moments. Tonight had started like any other Tuesday. The store sat at the intersection of Highway 41 and Maple Street, a beacon of fluorescent light in an otherwise dark stretch of road. Marcus had restocked the coffee station, wiped down the counters, and helped old Mr. Patterson, who came in every night at 11 for his decaf and a newspaper, even though Marcus gently reminded him each time that nobody really reads physical newspapers anymore. Mr. Patterson would just smile and say some habits were worth keeping. Around 1 in the morning, the store was empty. Marcus was thinking about Emma's birthday party. Running through the mental checklist, her friends from school would arrive at 2. Sarah was making her famous spaghetti. The cake was chocolate with vanilla frosting, exactly what Emma had requested. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, so the cake was decorated with little fondant animals. Marcus had worked 2 double shifts to afford it, but the image of her face when she saw it made every tired moment worth it. That's when he heard the car pull up outside. Not unusual, but something about the way the engine kept running made Marcus look up from the inventory sheet he'd been filling out. 3 men got out, leaving the car idling. They wore hoodies despite the warm September night, hands shoved deep in pockets. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. That primal instinct that tells you when something isn't right. They came in together, fanning out immediately. The bell above the door seemed louder than usual. Marcus straightened up, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. The tallest one approached the counter while the other 2 wandered toward the back aisles. Marcus could see them in the security mirror, not shopping, just moving. The man at the counter was young, maybe early 20s, with hard eyes that had seen too much too soon. He asked for cigarettes, a specific brand, and Marcus turned to get them from the rack behind him. That's when he heard the click of the lock on the front door. His heart started hammering. In 3 years, he'd never locked that door during business hours. When Marcus turned back around, the man's demeanor had changed completely. The pretense of being a customer evaporated like morning fog. Marcus saw the other 2 moving closer, blocking any path to the door. His hand moved slowly toward the panic button under the counter, but the tall one saw it and told him to stop moving. His voice was quiet, almost polite, which somehow made it more terrifying. Marcus raised his hands slowly, thoughts racing. He thought about the self-defense training Sarah had wanted him to take. The pepper spray she'd bought him. That was sitting uselessly in his locker in the back room. He thought about Emma waking up tomorrow morning, expecting her birthday party and her daddy to be there. His mouth went dry. The man told him to open the register. Marcus's hands shook as he complied, the old cash drawer sticking slightly, like it always did before sliding open with a metallic ring. There wasn't much inside. Miller's had gone mostly cashless, and Mr. Miller insisted on nightly deposits. Maybe $200 sat in the till. The man's face hardened when he saw how little was there, and he demanded to know where the safe was. Marcus explained there was no safe, that everything got deposited, that this was all there was. But the man didn't believe him. People who planned robberies like this always believed there was more. that workers were hiding something. One of the other men knocked over a display of chips, the bags exploding across the floor. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet store. That's when things escalated. Frustrated by the lack of money, the tall man reached across the counter and grabbed Marcus by his shirt, pulling him forward. Marcus could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne. The man's eyes were bloodshot, pupils dilated, and Marcus realized with sinking dread that he was high on something, which made him unpredictable, dangerous. He demanded Marcus take them to the office, to the safe he was convinced existed. Marcus tried to stay calm, tried to explain again, but his voice came out smaller than he wanted. He managed to press the panic button as the man dragged him around the counter, hoping the signal would reach the police station, hoping someone would come. The other two men were getting agitated, pacing, checking the windows. One of them picked up an energy drink and threw it against the wall, red liquid spraying across the white tile like blood. They pushed Marcus toward the back, toward the small office that held nothing but a desk, a computer for inventory, and a mini fridge with his lunch and Emma's birthday cake. The tall man shoved the door open, his anger growing when he saw there was indeed no safe, just a cramped room with papers and coffee-stained carpet. He spun on Marcus, accusing him of lying, of wasting their time. Marcus backed up until he hit the desk, his mind spinning through options and finding none good. He could see the cake in the fridge through the small window in the door, the cheerful animals mocking the darkness of this moment. He thought about Emma's face, about Sarah getting the call that something had happened, about all the tomorrows that might not come. That's when one of the men noticed the office had a rear exit, an emergency door that led to the alley. He suggested they should leave, that this was taking too long, that cops might be coming. But the tall man was beyond reason now, high and angry and embarrassed. He pulled something from his jacket, and Marcus's blood turned to ice when he saw it was a gun. Not pointed at him, not yet, but there, real and terrible in the fluorescent light. The man waved the gun around while shouting about being disrespected, about how he knew there was money somewhere, about how Marcus was holding out on them. Marcus put his hands up higher, telling them he had a daughter, that tomorrow was her birthday, pleading in a way that stripped away every bit of pride, but didn't matter because staying alive mattered more. One of the other men was at the emergency exit now, pushing on the bar, but the door had swollen in its frame from humidity and wouldn't budge. He slammed against it, frustrated. The third man was back in the store area, and suddenly there was a crash as he deliberately pushed over a shelf. Glass bottles shattered, liquid pooling on the floor. The destruction seemed to fuel their anger rather than release it. The tall man grabbed Marcus again, this time pressing him back toward the store area. The gun now pointed more deliberately in his direction. They emerged from the office to chaos. 2 shelves were down, merchandise everywhere. And Marcus thought about Mr. Miller finding this mess. Thought about losing his job if he survived this. Thought about how stupid it was to worry about a job when his life hung in the balance. They pushed him back behind the counter, demanding he open the lottery machine. Convinced the tickets were worth something, Marcus tried to explain that the tickets were tracked, that they couldn't be cashed without triggering alerts. But desperation has its own logic. His hands fumbled with the machine, dropping ticket rolls, his fingers refusing to cooperate. That's when the tall man lost it completely. He smashed the glass partition that separated the counter from the customer area, the sound explosive and final. Shards rained down on Marcus, one cutting his cheek. He felt warm blood trickle down his face and wondered if this was how it would end. In a convenience store at 2 a.m, over $200 and some lottery tickets. Marcus closed his eyes for just a moment, sending a silent message to Emma and Sarah, hoping somehow they could feel how much he loved them. When he opened them, the tall man was raising the gun, and Marcus knew with terrible certainty that this situation had spiraled beyond robbery into something darker. Then the bell above the door chimed. Everyone froze. The 3 men spun toward the entrance, and Marcus's heart sank further because the last thing he wanted was more victims, more people in danger. But what he saw made no sense. 2 elderly women stood in the doorway, both probably in their 70s, wearing matching bowling shirts with strikers embroidered across the back. They carried bowling bags and had clearly just come from the lanes down the road that stayed open late on Tuesdays. They took in the scene with surprising calmness. The shattered glass, the destroyed shelves, the three men, the gun, Marcus bleeding behind the counter. The taller of the two women, with white hair styled in a perfect silver bob, looked at the armed man and said in a voice that could have been commenting on the weather that this seemed like poor decision-making. Her companion, shorter and rounder with thick glasses, added that her grandson had made similar choices and was now serving 5 to 10. And did they really want to go down that path? The surreal calm of these women walking into an armed robbery and offering life advice broke something in the tension. The tall man, gun still raised, seemed utterly confused about how to respond to elderly bowling ladies critiquing his choices. He told them to get out, to leave, but his voice had lost some of its edge. The silver-haired woman, whose name Marcus would later learn was Dorothy, set her bowling bag down deliberately and told him she would not. She'd lived in this town for 73 years, had taught Sunday school to half the people in the county, and she wasn't about to let some young men make the biggest mistake of their lives without at least trying to talk sense into them. Her friend Beatrice added that they'd called the police from the parking lot as soon as they saw the situation through the window, so running was pointless. But maybe surrendering peacefully was still an option that didn't end with someone getting hurt or killed. The three men exchanged glances, the reality of their situation suddenly crystallizing. The tall one's hand holding the gun wavered. Dorothy stepped closer, unafraid, and started talking to him like a disappointed grandmother. She asked him about his mother, whether she knew where he was, what he was doing. She told him she could see he was scared, that being high and scared with a gun was a terrible combination, and that she'd held enough young men while they cried in jail cells to know this path led nowhere good. Marcus watched in amazement as this 70-something woman in a bowling shirt slowly talked down an armed robber. She spoke about second chances and first mistakes, about how one bad decision didn't have to define a whole life, about programs that could help with addiction, about the community that could support rather than condemn if he made the right choice right now. Beatrice walked calmly to Marcus and asked if he was all right, examining the cut on his face with the practiced concern of someone who'd raised 5 children. She pulled tissues from her purse and pressed them gently to his cheek, telling him it wasn't deep, that he'd be fine, that help was coming. In the distance, sirens began to wail. The sound seemed to deflate the last of the tall man's bravado. His shoulders sagged. Dorothy held out her hand, asking for the gun, promising she'd tell the police he'd cooperated, that he'd made the right choice at the end. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then slowly, like a puppet with cut strings, he lowered the weapon and handed it to her. Dorothy took it with the same matter-of-fact competence she'd probably used handling everything in her 7 decades, immediately making it safe and setting it on the counter. She told the 3 men to sit on the floor, hands visible, and incredibly they did. By the time the police cars screeched into the parking lot, lights painting the store in alternating red and blue, the situation was already over. Officers rushed in to find 2 elderly women in bowling shirts, standing guard over 3 seated suspects, and Marcus behind the counter, being tended to by someone's grandmother. The lead officer, who'd clearly expected a very different scene, looked at Dorothy and asked what happened. She smiled and said they'd just had a conversation about choices and consequences, and these young men had made the right one. The aftermath was a blur of statements and paramedics, and Mr. Miller arriving in his bathrobe, horrified at the damage, but crying with relief that Marcus was alive. The cut on his face needed only butterfly bandages. The real damage was to the store and to nerves that would take longer to heal. Dorothy and Beatrice refused to leave until they knew Marcus was truly okay. They sat with him while he called Sarah, his voice breaking as he told her he was safe, that he'd be home soon, that he'd be there for Emma's birthday. The women waited while he gave his statement, offering encouraging nods and pats on the shoulder. Before they finally left, Dorothy pulled Marcus aside. She told him she'd been on her way, home from bowling for 20 years on Tuesday nights, had passed this store 1,000 times. Tonight, something made her look through the window, made her see him in trouble, made her park and call 911. She didn't believe in coincidences, she said. She believed they were supposed to be there. That sometimes ordinary people are called to do extraordinary things, and the only choice is whether we answer. Beatrice hugged him and whispered that he was brave, that staying calm probably saved his life, and that Emma was lucky to have a father who fought to come home to her. Marcus made it to Emma's birthday party, exhausted but present. When she ran to him and hugged him tight, he held her longer than usual, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. Sarah looked at him over Emma's head with eyes that understood how close they'd come to a very different day. He told Emma about the brave women who helped him at work, framing it carefully so she wouldn't be scared, but would understand that kindness and courage come in unexpected forms. Emma declared that when she grew up, she wanted to be like those bowling ladies, brave enough to help people. Marcus thought that was a pretty good aspiration. Later, after the cake was eaten and the presents opened and the last friend had gone home, Marcus sat on the back porch while Emma played in the yard. Sarah brought him coffee and sat beside him, her hand finding his. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The three men were charged and faced serious consequences for their choices that night. But the prosecutor, hearing about Dorothy's conversation with them, connected them with rehabilitation programs. The tall one, whose name was Justin, eventually wrote Marcus a letter from jail, apologizing and thanking him for not fighting back, for staying calm, for giving Dorothy the chance to reach him before it was too late. Marcus never responded, but he kept the letter. Dorothy and Beatrice became minor local celebrities, the bowling grannies who stopped a robbery. They deflected the attention with characteristic grace, insisting they'd just done what anyone would do, though of course not everyone would walk into an armed robbery and offer life advice. The local news did a feature. The bowling alley named a lane after them. Marcus went back to work at Miller's after a week off. Mr. Miller offered him day shifts, but Marcus declined. This was his time with Emma, and he wouldn't let fear steal that from them. The first night back was hard. Every time the bell chimed, his heart raced, but he breathed through it and it got easier. Dorothy and Beatrice started stopping by on Tuesday nights after bowling, just to check in, to buy coffee and chat. They never mentioned that night unless Marcus brought it up. Mostly they talked about their grandkids and local gossip and whether Marcus had tried the new Mexican place on 5th Street. Their regular presence helped transform the store from a place of trauma back into just a place of work. Months later, on a quiet Tuesday around 2 in the morning, Marcus was restocking shelves when the bell chimed. He looked up to see a young man in a hoodie, hands in pockets, and felt the familiar spike of fear. But the young man just walked to the counter, asked politely for directions to the highway, bought a coffee, and left. Marcus realized his hands hadn't shaken. The fear was losing its grip. He thought about Dorothy's words that night, about ordinary people called to extraordinary moments. He'd been called to stay calm under unimaginable pressure. Dorothy and Beatrice had been called to walk into danger, armed only with moral authority and grandmotherly wisdom. Even Justin, in his way, had been called to make a choice and had ultimately chosen surrender over violence. We all face moments that test who we are and who we want to be. Sometimes those moments are dramatic, life-threatening, impossible to ignore. But more often they're quiet opportunities to show kindness, to speak truth, to stand up when it would be easier to walk away. Dorothy saw someone in trouble and didn't keep driving. That simple choice to care, to act, to help, rippled out in ways she couldn't have predicted, saving lives and changing futures. The world can feel dark sometimes, dangerous and unpredictable, but it's also full of bowling grandmothers who refuse to let fear win, of people who choose courage over comfort, of connections that remind us we're not alone in this. Kindness isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's walking into danger to protect a stranger. Sometimes it's tough love delivered to someone holding a gun. Sometimes it's just showing up, being present, refusing to let despair have the final word. Marcus still works the night shift at Miller's Corner Store. Emma is 10 now and still wants to be a veterinarian. Sarah still works at County General. Dorothy and Beatrice still bowl on Tuesday nights and still stop by for coffee. The ordinary rhythms of life continue, made precious by the knowledge of how fragile and valuable they are. And somewhere Marcus hopes Justin is making better choices, carrying forward the second chance offered by two women in bowling shirts who believed